What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Speakeasy Brewer. I'm Austin Williams. It's great to have you guys here today whenever somebody jumps on. Today, we are going to be going over my last stream where we kegged the Kolsch and the Stout. Obviously, it led to a failure, and so this is kind of going to be a recap of what happened, why it happened, and then when we encounter failure, what do we do, right? Because I know I'm not the only person that's encountered failure. We all encounter failure at some point in time. And so I'm wanting to use this one to just come through and say, hey, this is what happened. I failed in this particular way. This is what I was going through when I had that failure. And then this is what I'm going to do next, that kind of thing. And I'm hoping that it is helpful for any of you guys who are in the middle of a project or pursuing a dream or goal, and in the process you encounter failure, and then when you encounter failure, how do you process that? That's kind of what I want to go over today. So we're going to do a final taste test of the beer. I gave it a little over a week to condition a little bit and just sit and settle and see if maybe anything changed. I highly doubt it did, but because it was a pretty bad fail. But we're going to go over all of that today. So thanks for joining me today whenever somebody jumps on. This is just going to be a short little snippet of beer processing, or the beer process, brewing process. When you're a home brewer / moving towards a brewery, it's important to get feedback, be slightly critical, but use every failure as an opportunity to learn something new. So that's what we're going to go over today, okay? So in terms of the failed beer, I had these two beers, okay? We have a Kolsch and we have a Stout. Okay, the Stout looks like a Stout. That looks good. You'll notice that the Kolsch is hazy and almost like an amber color. That's not the color it was supposed to be. The color it was supposed to be is, I'll show you. Let me share my screen with you, and then once I do, check this out. All right. So this is what it was supposed to look like. This coloring right here. Okay, it was supposed to be nice, like a light gold color, and it was supposed to be completely clear. Okay, nice and clear, and that's not exactly what happened. Okay. So the big thing here that I feel like I'm pretty sure 100% certain that the reason my beers failed is because of the type of yeast I used. So in this particular beer, the Kolsch, I used a Dieter yeast from Imperial Yeast, which is based out of, I believe, Hood River, Portland, Oregon. Anyways, they're like my go-to yeast company. They have really good stuff. Y yeast is also really good, but I used Dieter before, and so I was like, I'm gonna use Dieter again. So I used Dieter, and the most important thing about Dieter yeast is that with this particular yeast, you need to ferment this beer and that yeast at a temperature between 60 and 69 degrees. Okay. This yeast was from White Labs, and it was an Irish ale yeast, basically the same type of yeast that they use in Guinness. And it was the same sort of situation. It was good for between 60 and 69 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so these two beers had a yeast that was to be fermented at a similar temperature. Okay, so early fermentation was good. This was clear as can be, and super crystal clear, and it was that beautiful gold. It was a lovely Kolsch color. Everything was going well, and this one was going really well too, and everything was healthy. So I went away for a week, so did Brubella, and while we were gone for a week, we have one of those thermometers in our house. It's Nest, and it's a sustainability sort of thing, and so what happens is it goes into eco mode when it doesn't notice movement in the house, which is awesome because while you're gone, it's not wasting energy. But it's not awesome when you're in my position and you're trying to brew or ferment beer at a specific temperature, and you need the AC to not turn off. So what happened was, while we were both gone, the AC turned off, and when it turned off, the house temperature rose, and the beer temperature also rose to about 75 degrees Fahrenheit, okay? So when the temperature increases when you're fermenting, that does mean it's going to be a faster fermentation, but it also means that you're more likely to get an off flavor in your beer, okay? Unless the yeast specifically says you want to ferment at a higher temperature, because sometimes higher temperatures will bring out some more like estery, fruity profiles. It just depends on the yeast. The IPA that I brewed, what was it, 2 weeks ago now? That beer is fermenting right now, and it needs to be room temperature between 70 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and right now it's about 75 degrees Fahrenheit, okay? And that yeast does better at a higher temperature because it produces those fruity, citrusy ester flavors that we're shooting for, as well as aromas, okay? So it really depends on the yeast. Some yeast, like these yeast, you need to do it cold or cool. And then with like a lager yeast, you need to ferment it at an even colder temperature. Any temperature between like 40 and like 55, or maybe if it's 45 and 55. It's a really small range, and it needs to be colder. Lager yeasts take a longer time to ferment, and an ale yeast, it's a shorter time, just because of the temperature difference. Okay, but temperature can play a huge part in even the cleanliness of your beer and whether it's going to clean up or not. So yeast, when you use them, not only is it a temperature thing, but it's also a characteristic of each yeast. So some yeast, we use two I don't even know how to say this right now. I'm still kind of recovering. I'm tired. So long work week. There's two words that we use when it comes to yeast, and one is flocculation and one is attenuation, okay? Flocculation is a really fancy word for when your beer is done fermenting, all that krausen and trub and all the nastiness that's at the top of your beer during fermentation, that foam, it all drops out, okay? And the higher the flocculation, the clearer your beer will be. So if you're wanting to have a really nice clear beer, you're going to want to find a beer or a yeast that has a higher flocculation. So anything between medium to high to very high. Okay, that's going to help clarify your beer. Once it's done fermenting, all of that stuff's going to fall to the bottom, and it's going to be good to go. And then you have attenuation, and attenuation is the efficiency of the yeast. Okay, so most of the yeast that I use has an attenuation between 70 and 77%. I think the highest that I've seen on any of the yeasts I've used was about 80%. Okay, attenuation is just the ability of the yeast to process. It's just the efficiency of the yeast for the yeast to eat the sugar. That efficiency. Okay, so that's what those two things are. So, anyways, I just broke down the importance of yeast. Okay, and seriously though, like one of the most important things you can do during fermentation is temperature control. If you learn anything other than sanitize and clean and water and temperature control, of all the things I talk about beer, those are like the four main points, okay? Anyways, so the beer failed, or at least we thought. So we're going to try this real quickly and see if anything's changed, and then I'm going to go into the whole idea, like, what do we do with this failure, that kind of thing, okay? So here's our Kolsch. We're going to go light to dark. That's kind of the rule of thumb when you're trying beer, is you go light to dark. Or, like, if you're going for wine, you do white wine to dark wine or red wine, okay? So we're going to go with this, okay? Obviously, it's kind of it's hazy, which means there's something floating in there. Could be the yeast. It could be another, like, bacteria or something. I'm not quite sure. It could just be a reaction to the heat. But there's definitely some sediment floating around in it, so that's unfortunate, okay? And this is even at a cold temperature. I did not carbonate these, and the reason I did not carbonate them is because I did not want to waste resources on a potentially failed beer. So in my experience, when I brew a beer, if the beer tastes good when it's not carbonated, then it means that it's going to be a great beer nonetheless, okay? If it doesn't taste good, I don't want to be wasting resources on... sorry, I got to plug in my computer. I just realized it's dying. I don't want to be wasting resources on a beer that's failed, because with these two beers, it's a total of about, I would say, about a little over $100, $120 or something like that in terms of ingredients. not to mention about 16 hours worth of work. So that's a lot of work. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of effort. It's a lot of resources. So I don't want to use the CO2 on it. Okay. Anyways, so that's that. So again, the color. I mean, it's a darker than what I expected for a Kolsch. It's hazy. Shouldn't be hazy if it's a Kolsch. Okay. I did use a little bit of white wheat malt, but I did not use a ton. And the white wheat malt is more for kind of head retention that you're wanting to look for in a Kolsch. Okay. So, anyways, we're gonna do a smell, and then we're gonna do a taste, and we're gonna do a final review of it. And the reason I haven't thrown it away yet, even though it failed, is because you never know that when a beer, after sitting for a while, will like shapen up, if that's the right way for putting it. So anyways, let's do that. It's kind of got a sweet smell to it, which I think is okay and appropriate for a Kolsch. Doesn't smell bad. Definitely smells like definitely smells like what I'd expect a Kolsch to smell like. But there is this extra, it's almost like a fruity flavor. And I know for Kolsch, it's okay for there to be like a fruity aroma to it. So if I were to smell this, I'm like, yeah, it's not too bad. Okay, so, ooh. Oh, the aftertaste is so bad. The aftertaste tastes like burning plastic is what it tastes like. Ugh. Okay, can't drink any more of that. Alright, so that beer is a fail. That is a 100% failed beer. Fail. I wish I had a button that I could push and it would just be like, fail, or pass, or awesome. I need to have something like that. Anyways, so that's the Kolsch. The initial taste wasn't too bad. It was clean. It was crisp. It was a little sweet. Not too bad. A little biscuity. So kind of what you'd expect. But the aftertaste it literally tastes like burning plastic. So not good. Not good at all. Okay, so we're going to go with the stout. My thinking on the stout when I did it initially, when I kegged it, it didn't necessarily taste like a stout. It tasted more like a brown ale. So I don't know if it's necessarily a 100% fail, but we're about to try it again. So I wanted to make sure that it was a nice, good stout. Looking at the color, it's opaque, which is good, because most porters and stouts are. So that's a good sign. It's brown in color, which is also a good sign. It smells like a stout. Smells a little sweet, maybe chocolatey, maybe a little hint of nuttiness. Okay, so all things that are fairly good for a stout, not too bad. Oh, got some up my nose. Okay. Whoa, okay. Slow down, Turbo. Slow down. All right. So we're going to try this, okay? Okay. I would say for a stout, it tastes like a brown ale up front. Nutty. There's a little hint of chocolate, maybe a little coffee, but it's really bitter. Like, really bitter. Like, on the back, like, in the back of your throat, like the very back of your tongue. Normally, when you're dealing with bitterness in beer, you're going to feel it on the sides of your tongue. It's more near the back, but like on the sides of your tongue. But this is like a weird bitterness where it's like I can feel it at the very back of my tongue, like as if, like right before going down my throat. Doesn't taste good, honestly. The aftertaste is not great either. I think it's got a similar aftertaste to this, the Kolsch. but I think it's more muted because of the darker grains in it. But rubbing alcohol, that's what I'm tasting. Okay, so this book right here is a highly recommended book from me. Okay, I'm not getting sponsored, but this book, you got to read this book. If you're going to be a home brewer, this is a book that needs to be in your library. Okay, so in the very front, there is a page, and we've got this thing called the aroma vocabulary. Okay, you got pluses and minuses, and it goes through fermentation, positives and negatives, malt and adjuncts, positive and negatives, spiced beers, positive and negatives, hops, positives, hop negatives, wild and wood aged, positive and negative. Okay, so these are aromas, but they can also go with flavor as well, because you're going to taste it. Okay, so I believe that what happened here, the big fail point here, is a lack of temperature control. Okay, so if we were to go down here and we're looking fermentation, I believe it happened during fermentation. Okay, so we're going to come all the way down. So the things that I found here, and this is where you just got to read all of them and think about it and drink it and try it. Okay, so this beer right here, it's kind of chemically. It tastes like rubbing alcohol and alcohol. Yep, it says acetone, alcohol, rubbing alcohol, fuses. I've never tasted a fuse, but I am assuming if it's a fuse, then it tastes like a fuse. I don't know. But for the Kolsch, the flavor that I was getting was Band-Aid or plastic or burning plastic. I found that elsewhere. Burnt match, sulfide, sulfur dioxide. It wasn't really sulfury. But I'd say it's definitely falls under like medicinal, plastic, Band-Aid. Really gross. Okay, so those are the beers. So I've confirmed it. Those beers are 100% failed. Major disappointment. When I tried it day one, when I kegged it, I kind of tried to hide my disappointment, but I've been dealing with the disappointment all week. Okay. For those of you who follow my stream, you know that my ultimate goal is I want to start a brewery. I think it'd be a blast. I think it'd be great to brew great beer and have a great atmosphere where people can come and enjoy my beer and hang out in a cool atmosphere. That's what I really, really want to do. And I want to have really unique beers and really great beers that people just want to come to my brewery just to try. Okay, that's the ultimate goal. I've been brewing for about 3 years now. I've had now 4 failed beers out of maybe 50. So I would say my percentage of good beers versus bad beers is pretty good. But I think it's important to go through those failures, even though the feeling of failure sucks. So for those of you who failed, which I'm sure is all of you, you failed at something. Maybe you tried really hard at a sport one time and you totally failed. You didn't get first place. You didn't even get second place. Maybe you didn't even get third place. Maybe you got last place. Or maybe you put a lot of effort into studying for a test and you did not do great. Okay. Or maybe you wanted a job, but you didn't get the job offer because you didn't do as well as somebody else in the interview. Okay. So we all deal with failure. Failure is a part of life. Okay. But I think one thing that's important about failure is you can either be defeated by failure, because with failure comes the disappointment and frustration of like wasted time or wasted resources or all that hard work that you put into something and it just did not turn out the way you wanted it to. You got that, and then you also have that hopelessness and that fear, right? The hopelessness is, well, like, well, what's the point? Like, maybe you fail on your first time at something. You're like, well, what's the point of me doing it again? I'm probably gonna fail again. And then you also have fear, which I see somebody just jumped on. I'm not trying to relate fear to the person who just jumped on. But anyways, whoever it is, welcome to the Speakeasy Brewer. I just did a quick taste test of some beers I kegged last week. And I was trying to do a final taste test to see if they kind of settled down during their conditioning or if they were just as bad as they were when I first tried them. And they are just as bad as the first time I tried them, so that's super unfortunate. So right now I'm just kind of processing and doing a quick debrief of what happened. So welcome. Appreciate you being here. If you like anything that has to do with beer, if you like beer, drinking it, tasting it, smelling it, or you want to homebrew, this is the place for you, okay? We're going to go over everything beer. And I would love to get into wine and liquor as well, but we're going to start with beer now because that's my main focus. But anyways, so I failed on these beers. Okay, and out of all of like the 50 beers I've made, I've had 4 beers that have failed. The first one was an experimental beer. It was not great. It wasn't horrible, but it wasn't great. And I'd say this Kolsch is even worse than that. And then I had a blonde ale that I brewed, I don't know, about a year or so ago, 2 years ago. It's been 2 years now. And that one failed. And that what I know what happened there is what I was doing is when I was cleaning my fermentation or fermenting equipment, what I was using was I was using the bristle part of the sponge, and I was creating micro scratches in the plastic, and those micro scratches can be a perfect home for wild bacteria or yeast or something like that. And I probably didn't do a great job cleaning it or sanitizing it, and then it just ruined my beer. And then these 2 beers, what I found out and what I believe is that during fermentation, I did not have good temperature control because they were supposed to ferment. Both of them were supposed to ferment. I'll show you because you just jumped on. So I have my stout and my Kolsch, okay? The stout looks like a stout. The Kolsch does not look like a Kolsch, and that's because of probably whatever was allowed to live in there because of the heat, okay? They're supposed to be fermenting at a temperature between 60 and 69 degrees, and I let it get up to 75, okay? It was kind of out of my control. But that's whatever. But it's a lesson learned. And so the whole thing that I'm trying to go over is how do we deal with failure, okay? Because all of the feels that you get with failure, the disappointment and the frustration of all your hard work, resources, whatever, going to something that fails, and then that hopelessness of like, well, what's the point? Why do I even do this if I'm going to just fail? And then the fear of like, what if I fail again, okay? I think it's really, really, really important that if you do encounter failure, that you allow yourself to think through and process what happened, why did it happen, and then also even emotionally process and be like, why do I feel this way? What am I feeling? Is this a good feeling? Is this a bad feeling? And how do I handle this? Don't bottle it up. Don't be like, well, forget it. I don't care, blah, blah, blah. I think it's really, really important to kind of push through that resistance. I feel like failure is, to some extent, a resistance that we as creative people, as creative beings even, we come against. And it's really important to push through that pain. It's really important to push through that resistance. It's really important to push beyond all of those things, push beyond the fear of failure. Because if you give up after you fail, then you are defeated. But if you don't give up after you fail, then that's something totally different, okay? You can use every failure and every mistake as a lesson. If you can handle the pain, because it is important to push through that pain. And there is some level of pain. And I don't know, if you're in sports, you're going to experience physical pain probably, maybe because you get an injury or something. But in this particular thing, it wasn't like a physical pain. It was just like that emotional pain that comes with the frustration and like, I just wasted $100 and time and And also, to add to the pain and the difficulty, these were going to be prototype beers for the brewery that I'm trying to start with some guys. And so just like, man, I got hit by the hopelessness hardcore this whole last week. So that's why I'm doing this, is because I want to talk to you guys about this and say it's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes. That's learning. If you're going to learn anything, you will experience resistance. You're going to experience pain, difficulties, challenges, and you're going to have setbacks and failures. And it's okay. It's okay. Just because you have a setback and failure and a mistake does not mean that you're done and you're out of the game. And in fact, just take it as a lesson and learn from it. So, so that's the big thing. And here's what I'm going to say. With this, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to debrief. Okay, I want to learn as much as I can from this failure, because, things that are best learned are learned in real life, okay? It's called the law of, what is it called? The law of, help me out here, somebody. I learned this a long time ago. Not law of primacy, that's like things first learned or always remembered. Basically, it's like the law of intensity. Thank you. I don't know who just thought of it, but it was me. Okay. The law of intensity. So the law of intensity says that things that are experienced in real life are strongerly are better remembered, better learned. I don't know. So basically, if it's an intense situation, you're going to learn it and remember it better than you would if you just read it in a book and there's nothing involved with experience at all. Okay, we use it a lot of the time in flying. Okay, the law of intensity is we put pressure on you, we put you in a scenario, we teach you how to deal with the difficulty. Usually, like an emergency situation, your plane catches on fire, your engine dies, whatever. We put you through the ringer, okay? We say, go read these things, study these things, practice these things. Then we're going to do it. We're going to do it in real life because you need to know what it feels like, okay? We're not going to catch the plane on fire or anything like that, but we have to put pressure on you in real life because you're going to remember it better and it's going to stick a little bit harder, okay? So after you deal with failure, debrief, okay? Go over everything that happened. What went well? What didn't go well? What can I do next time? Okay, and try and identify the fail point. Okay, and so that's what I'm choosing to do. Instead of letting the hopelessness win, and instead of letting the fear win, I'm going to keep moving forward. Because I mean, can you imagine that? Can you imagine if I'm just like, well, I had two failed beers at once. Okay, I give up. I'm not streaming anymore. I'm not doing the beer brewing thing anymore. Like, screw it all. Hands up in the air. I give in. White flag, whatever. I mean, that's lame sauce, right? That's a very weak and unhealthy reaction to have. So we should take this as an opportunity and use a fine-tooth comb to go through and really see what we can get from this, so that the next time when I do brew these beers, I don't have the same mistakes, okay? Will I fail more in the future? Probably. I mean, the whole journey of brewing beer it's a fantastic journey because beer is the end goal. But at the same time, it is intensely difficult. It's pretty hardcore. There's a lot of things there. And for somebody like me who hasn't taken like an official professional course, I'm learning things from books, Reddit, forums online. I'm talking with brewers. I'm just learning as much as I can. And it's just a matter of practice, right? Practice makes perfect. And when you make an error, you correct that error. And the next time you do it, just do it better, right? So that's what I'm doing. So I'm not going to let the hopelessness or the fear overcome me. And neither should you. If you have had a failure or a setback in your life, do not let it hold you back from getting more, okay? Use it as an opportunity to learn, okay? So here's my debrief for what happened, okay? So what went well? What went well with the whole process from beginning to end? Well, what went well is I had a really good recipe. I think the recipe was very balanced. I think everything that I wanted in terms of the hops that I chose for the proper bitterness, I think it was everything from the grains I used, the hops that I used, the yeast that I used. All of it was leading me up to what would be an on-profile, appropriate beer for what you'd expect for a Kolsch, okay? I believe Big Juicy Cat, he is in Cologne, Germany, and we talked about beer. And he was like, well, looks good. So it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to, but I'm going to do it again. That's what I'm going to do, okay? So the recipe went good. It was right on profile for what we wanted for a Kolsch, okay? I did a yeast starter, which was great. It gave us more yeast than we would have started off with just the packet. So I doubled the yeast, which means it was going to be a more efficient fermentation. Brew day and cleaning, I did a great job cleaning. The fermenter was clean. Everything was sanitized really, really well. And I made certain that nothing was getting into my beer that should not be in my beer. So I think I did a really good job at that too. Okay. And I feel like even the first week of fermentation went really well. It was a very, very healthy fermentation. It was right in the temperature range that I wanted it to be. And I think overall everything should have worked out. Okay. The one thing where I can see it being a failure, so that's all that went well, okay? That's what I think I did good. What I didn't do good is the temperature control, okay? Like I said, the first week was great, but then what happened is both me and Brubella, we left. We left for a week, and our thermometer turned off, which means that the house temperature went up, which means the beer temperature went up, okay? It was about 5 to 6 degrees higher than it should have been for fermentation, and I believe that that's what set it off. And because of that, I think that's what it was. Phenolic. Yeah, I think that's the proper word. Is because of that we started getting the off flavors, the off phenols, and it's PHENOLS. Or you might even see the term phenolic, PHENOLIC. So phenolic, phenols. It's just an off flavor. Okay. And so those off flavors were rubbing alcohol, burnt plastic, Band-Aid, and nasty, super duper bitter, gross beer. Okay. And so I think the pinpoint here is that temperature control. And both of them were at that temperature for about 5 days or more. Okay. The stout wasn't 100% done fermenting when it went up to that temperature. The Kolsch, for the most part, was done fermenting, but it still was conditioned. It was still in that temperature for a period of time, and that could be part of the reason why it got that off color. So it's now hazy, almost opaque, and kind of like a reddish green color, which your Kolsch should not look like that. Okay, yeah. So what does that mean for me? Okay, if I feel like I've identified it, and this is science here, right? Brewing is all about science. Okay. Water chemistry, so chemistry, you got biology, and it's just about trial and error. Okay, you do something, if it fails, you do something different. If it fails again, you do something different again, right? You learn from your mistakes. Or you drink a beer and you're like, that's good, it could be better. Take notes. Find out what flavors were there. Was it too sweet when it shouldn't be sweet? Was it too hoppy when it shouldn't be hoppy? Do I need to change the balance of the balance of the different malts? Do I need to change the hops? Do I need to try a different yeast? Do I need to try a different water? Did I have it, sit in the sun when it shouldn't have been sitting in the sun? Was it too hot during fermentation? Too cold during fermentation? There's all these little things that can happen, okay? So that's part of the science that we're dealing with right here. So what am I going to do differently next time? Well, what I can do differently is not leave town and make sure that the AC is on and keep control of that by just watching and seeing how it's changing. Like, is it too hot or is it getting too hot? I need to cool it down as much as possible. So that's one way I could do it. Another way I can do it is I've got a fridge out in my garage and a kegerator, and I could put those beers in there, and I could get this tool called an Inkbird, and it's a thermometer that goes into your kegerator or your fridge. And basically what it does is it monitors the temperature. You set it for the temperature you want, and it'll turn it off and turn it back on according to the temperature based on what it is. And it will maintain a specific temperature for you. So that's what I can do. I don't have the funds to create to buy a glycol chiller to kind of maintain a temperature for that beer. So that's something that I can't do right now. So those are my two options. I think both options are good. All I know is that whatever happens next time I brew this Kolsch is I need to maintain that temperature. Same with the stout. If I'm going to use the same yeast. And honestly, I don't know if I'm going to use the same yeast because that's not the yeast I was going to use before. The yeast I was going to use before was another imperial yeast called Darkness or The Darkness. And that was more for really causing all of the flavors and aromas that you'd expect from a stout to really pop out and be great. So I'm going to change that up a little bit. But otherwise, I think the Kolsch recipe, I'm going to keep it the same. I'm just going to monitor the temperature with the stout. I'm going to keep it the same. I'm just going to use the Darkness imperial yeast for the fermentation. And if I use the Darkness, then I don't need to worry about the colder temperature or temperature control, because it's going to be room temperature, and that's what it needs to ferment at. Where the Kolsch needs to have the temperature control. So I'm going to do both of them again. And I'm going to change those things to see if they will come out the right way. So that's that. Okay, so that's my debrief. What went well? What didn't go well? What can I fix? And how am I going to do that? Okay, so that's what I highly recommend you guys. If you experience any form of failure, I highly recommend that when you do, to kind of use that debriefing style when you do something, okay? Even if it goes well, you should debrief. What went well? What didn't go well? What can I improve on? For beer, I'm going to add into okay, what are the flavors I taste? What are the aromas that I smell? Are these aromas and flavors the things that I want to smell and taste? Yes or no? Okay. It's still a great beer, but this isn't what I want for this particular beer. And I think it's really important for you to be picky about certain things. And there's this book that I read, and this is kind of going to be one of my last thoughts is, if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. I'm not saying by reading this you're going to become a rich person in terms of money or anything like that. And I wouldn't say you should read this book for the purpose of that only. I think there's some gems in this book that are really helpful for you if you're wanting to chase after goals or start a business or things like that. But there's some really, really solid lessons in that book. And one of the lessons is this, okay? There's a story that he talks about where some guy in New York gets excited about the gold rush in the West, and he sells everything, and he takes his money, and he takes out a loan, and he goes and he buys a plot of land, and he buys mining equipment, and he starts digging for gold. And lo and behold, he finds a gold ore vein, and he's like, all right, I struck it rich. I got the gold that I wanted. Yeah. So he goes and he rounds up his family members, his nephews, his uncles, his brothers, everybody. He says, come on out, I found some gold. We're going to become rich men. We're going to become rich, so rich. It's going to be great. Okay, so they go out there and they dig. And they dig and I should say mine. They mine. And they follow this gold ore, and they're just pulling gold in every which way. They have enough gold now to pay off all the equipment. They break even. They're starting to give gold to each other. Then one day the gold ore vein disappears. Okay? So they keep digging. Nothing. Digging. Nothing. And they do that for like a month or 2 or 3 and nothing. And then they start digging in different directions trying to see if they can find another gold ore vein. And they don't find anything. So, boom, failure. Okay? A setback. They were successful to a point, and then boom, they got hit by some failure and some resistance. And they're, what they should have done is stopped and say, well, what can we do now? Like, do we go buy another piece of property and see if we can find gold there? Do we keep digging? What do we do? Because at this point, they need to make a decision. They either keep going, or they sell all their equipment, take their wins, and leave. Okay, so that's what they did. They gave up. They threw in the towel. They're like, okay, well, we've dug the ore. There's no more gold in this area. That's it. Okay. So they end up selling the equipment, and some local junk guy's like, hey, I'll buy your mining equipment. So he buys the mining equipment from them, and he's like, I'll buy your mine too. And they're like, sweet, it's all yours. Okay. So this gentleman and his family, they take off back to New York, and they have a little bit of money, but nothing to write home about. Maybe a year's worth of salary, and that's about it, which that's pretty good. So what ends up happening is he hears about a year or so later that this junk man that he sold this equipment to, that the junk man is millionaire, multi-millionaire. He found another gold ore vein, and he was raking in gold left and right and was making huge amounts of cash because of the gold. And so he was wondering, he's like, what in the earth, what happened? So he contacted the guy and he said, what did you do? What happened? He's like, well, I bought your equipment, and I hired a geologist to come out and tell me and give me like the lay of the land, so I know which way to dig and what I can do, and if there was any viability left in this mine. And the geologist, knowing the fault characteristics of that area, he said, I believe that if you keep digging this direction for 3 more feet, you're going to strike gold. So that's what he did. He took the geologist's recommendation, and he kept digging. Literally 3 feet from where the previous miners stopped was the next ore vein, and it was massive. So sometimes, and I guess what I should say is, you never know when you're 3 feet away from the next gold vein. Okay, so sometimes you need to push beyond when that point of wanting to give up, wanting to give in. And for me, speaking of all this, I'm not even close to wanting to give up and give in, because I understand that part of my journey is going to involve lots of failure, lots of mistakes, lots of learning, and it's going to be hard. And it's not going to be easy. It's a steep learning curve, and it's a hardcore journey. And that's the way it is with most things. So just remember, don't give up. There will be setbacks. Sometimes you need to pivot, and sometimes all you need to do is you need to just find somebody who knows more than you in a specific area, and you just need to learn from them, okay? And sometimes it's just, like in my scenario, not only am I going to learn more from people who know more than me about homebrewing, but I'm also going to just try and try again, because if anything, the next time I do these beers, they might be some of the best beers I've ever made. You never know. Going back real fast to fear, hopelessness and fear. I do have a fear, and that fear is, what if the reason why my Kolsch is that certain color isn't just because of the temperature, but what if there was a bacteria or wild yeast that got in it, and what if I didn't clean the fermenter well enough? What if that wild bacteria or yeast is in the fermenter still? What if even when I clean it, it doesn't do well enough? What if when I ferment my next beer, it ruins another beer? So taking that fear and processing that fear, I'm already thinking about that right now. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to do the beer again. I'm really good right now about cleaning. I know to not use any scratchy surfaces, so I feel like I've hedged my bets in the fact that I didn't make any scratches in the surfaces, so I don't think there's going to be room for there to be any sort of wild yeast or bacteria or anything like that. So I think that's good. I'm going to sanitize extra. I'm going to also use a little bit of that oxidizing agent, that PBW, to clean off anything that's in there that I haven't gotten yet. I'm going to be very, very careful to do really, really well at cleaning and sanitizing this container to hedge my bets, okay? Hedge my losses. And then I'm going to brew the same beer. And if I brew the same beer and I control the temperature and everything is exactly the same, then I know that there's probably something wrong with the fermenter, which in this case, it would be another failure. It would be a loss of beer again, and so the money for the beer and the resources for the beer, and then if it's because of the fermenter having some bacteria in it that I wasn't able to get because I messed up on cleaning somehow, could be a possibility, then that means I also lose a fermenter. Okay, so now that just means I need to get a new fermenter, and I'm going to brew the beer again, because that means that I now found out exactly what went wrong. So that's what I'm going to do differently, okay? So yeah, when you encounter fear, process that fear of what do I fear? Why do I fear it? And if I fear those things, what can I do to overcome that fear in the midst of trying again? Okay, so some things to think about, okay? So I just want to challenge you all, and I did this on purpose to be transparent and let you guys know that, one, I failed twice, and two, I'm going to not let this failure make me give up. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep going, because I like streaming and talking with y'all and being here with y'all and going through this journey with y'all. And I want to be a home brewer. Well, I'm going to be a home brewer, but I want to start my own brewery. And the whole journey requires lots of opportunities to fail. And so I need to make sure that every time I fail, I need to remind myself, don't give up, don't give up, don't give up. Find out what happened, fix it, try again. Let's keep going. Let's just keep going. And that's how things like beer or other things, that's how people get stronger. They use their failure as fuel to motivate them to move beyond that difficulty, that resistance, that pain, that fear, that hopelessness, that disappointment that comes with failure. Okay, so don't let failure make you give up, because when you give up, you are defeated. So don't get defeated. Just take it as a lesson and move on. So yeah, that's all I got for y'all. I hope this is motivational. I know it's not a whole lot of beer in this episode or this stream, but I need to let y'all know what I'm going through and bring you all on this journey. I want to be transparent, and I hope that this is an encouragement to you guys as you go through life and you encounter various failures or setbacks, that you just don't give up. You keep pushing forward. So that's another reason why I'm doing this. In terms of the future, the near future, I am going to have a couple insane weeks ahead. So I will not be doing much streaming. So I have 6 days of work coming up, and then I'm leaving town for a wedding, and then I'm coming back and I'm going to work, and then I'm going on vacation. So I'm going to say it's probably going to be about 2.5 weeks before I do another stream. Like a big stream, like a brew stream, or a beer, or yeah, it'll be a brew stream, or something along that line. So probably what I'll do is I'll do some mini streams from here until then, but nothing crazy, like nothing more than an hour, kind of like this one's about 45 minutes or so. It's going to be short. It's going to be short. I'm going to build some recipes. We're going to try them out a little bit later, and I might do some beer reviews, but there's not going to be anything in terms of like major content like brewing beer or kegging. I might do a kegging stream here in the next day or two because my IPA is ready to go, and I'm going to dump these beers out. It's going to hurt to pour them out, but it's just what it is. So I'll probably stream that as well because I think it's going to be a win because it smells amazing and my mouth waters every single time I smell it, so I know it's going to be good. So there's that. So yeah, so stay tuned for the next couple days for a keg stream, which I'm going to be kegging my IPA. Otherwise, stay tuned for some beer reviews and some beer recipe builds. That's all I'm probably going to be doing in the next couple weeks, and then starting on the week of the 13th, I think, through the 16th, something along that line. Let's see, where are we at? October? It'll be the 16th through the 19th. I'll probably do my next brew stream. I might have a special guest who's my grandfather. So, grand hop something. I don't know. I'll have to come up with something. Some gunner, if you see this video, you need to help me come up with a nickname for my grandfather who will help me be brewing. Hopefully he'll be here. Otherwise, I'm going to be doing... Oh, I know. I'm going to be going home for a night, so I might do a beer tasting with my stepdad. So, the Brew Wizard. What? No. Yeah. We could do one with your dad, too. We could do that. Brubella's dad, my father-in-law. Not Saruman or Brew Wizard. No. That's my stepdad. He needs to try Gonner's German Pilsner, and we're going to do a taste test. But I will be doing that with him here later in the month. So anyways, just stay tuned. There's a lot going on. There's going to be a lot happening. If you don't see a whole lot of streams from me, it doesn't mean I gave up. And just be patient, because guess what? When I come back after this crazy couple of weeks of craziness, we're going to be brewing some beer. We're going to be doing some beer reviews. We're going to be doing a lot. So do not miss out. By the way, I'm about 9 follows away from being an affiliate, which will be super helpful because then I can actually post a schedule like on an exact day at exact time and not have this whole silly repeat thing that I have to have. Also, if you're not on my Discord server, get on there because that's where I'm going to be posting about upcoming streams and such. So don't miss out, because if you miss out, it's a sad day. Sad day. But I've got some really fun beers that I'm going to be brewing, and so do not miss out on that, because we're going to be brewing I'm going to try for a Trappist style Belgian ale, because I kept some yeast from one of the Trappist ales that I have in my fridge, so I'm really excited to see if I can use that yeast still. So we're going to do a test on that to make sure it's still alive, and if it is alive, we're going to use it in our Trappist beer, and then I'm going to try for a pineapple flavored beer. So Tian Kuno requested a pineapple flavored beer. So I'm going to be shooting for that too at some point in time. I also want to try a few other specialty beers. So I've got some really unique beers that I'm going to be working on. And I'm really excited to go through that process with you guys. So if you have ideas of beers you want to see, send me a message in a whisper on Twitch, or join the Discord and jump on there and say, hey, what about this beer? What about this beer? Also, if you have a beer that you think I need to try, type it in there. Be like, hey, I think you should try this beer. And I'll review it. I want to try all the beers, and I want to brew all the beers. There's only so much I can do, but I want to involve you guys. You guys help me determine what I brew next. You guys help me determine what I taste and review next. Without you guys, this channel would be nothing. So anyways, I'm going to sign off now. It's been 50 minutes. I see that somebody just jumped on. I'm sorry you got the butt end of the stream, but welcome anyways. Welcome to the Speakeasy Brewer. Before I leave, I'm just going to say if you like beer, you like seeing how beer is made, you like beer reviews, anything that involves beer, this is the channel for you. So make sure to watch the whole thing. This was kind of more of like a debrief of my last stream where I had 2 failed beers at once, which was really depressing. But I was just talking about how to process failure in this stream. So I'm hoping it is a motivation and an encouragement to all y'all who go through life and encounter failures. We all encounter failures, but it's important that we overcome. What's that? There's a meme out there. It's improvise, adapt, and overcome. We as humans are really good at doing that. So I encourage you guys to improvise, adapt, and overcome, and don't let failure defeat you. Okay? That's all I got for y'all. So you guys are amazing, and I will do my best to put up some streams here in the next couple weeks, and then just be ready for the end of October into November this winter. We're going to get bananas in making beer. So it's going to be fun. Trying beer and brewing beer. All right. That's all I got for y'all. Thanks for joining today. You guys are amazing. Be adventurous. Stay thirsty. Speak easy.